And I've set that aside for you guys to work on your projects with your teams next week. So unless I hear a lot of resistance, my plan would be to talk to Reed and see if he can teach during the earlier session, then you guys have the afternoon to work on your projects.
Woohoo!
Right?
Good plan.
For Swan.
Yeah. Do I hear any nays to that plan? Okay, having heard none, then we'll plan on doing that way. I think we had 4 book reports today, so let's start with that. I want to cover some stuff on the HR material today that I want to make sure you get as concepts. I'm going to say, please read those sections that are in your reading requirements. And I think I pointed out that you should also look at there's an appendix in the PMBOK that you're going to want to look at that speaks to some of these issues. Make sure you do that in preparation for the test. And then I've got a couple of videos today that are examples of project reports that people have done in the past. I'll tell you this, these are a couple of really good ones. So, don't think you have to go to this extent. It's just to give you an example of what something like this would look like and what I have in mind in terms of presenting your material. So, having said that, any questions?
Are we going to get our midterms back?
We are at the end of class today. I have them. I didn't want to give them out first because then I felt like I wouldn't have anybody's focus. If you want to discuss them, if you have questions about them, if there's any issue with them and you want to give me a call or send me a note, that'll be fine. I'd be glad to have that conversation with you. I will tell you that my normal mode is to go through all of them and grade them and then go back through them and spend some time making sure I've been fairly consistent. Because I graded these over 3 weeks and was probably under the influence of drugs part of the time I was grading them, I didn't do that. So if you look at them and you say, hey, my buddy, you took off 8 points on his, you took off 10 points on mine, fine, give it back to me, I'll take 10 off of his too.
So the grades can get worse.
Yeah. Well, they tended to kind of fluctuate, but if you assume I might have been on drugs when I graded yours and you want me to look at it again, and really, I'm being serious now. I will look at them again. If you have questions or you have a disagreement with me, I'll be glad to look at them. I will say this, if I look at them again, I will look at them again and it might go up or down. So, but I'm willing to do that. And I don't mean that in any kind of threatening way at all. I want to be fair, okay? So, any comments about that? Any questions? I don't feel much different this week than I did last week about how you did on them. There are some questions that obviously what I was looking for was not well communicated, so, but some of you got it right, so or, you got what I was looking for, I should say it that way.
Are you going to tell us which ones those are?
We will talk through it if you want to. I thought in preparation for the final, we would spend a few minutes. And some of you will know, because as I graded them, I would go back. If you were the one or one of those people that gave me the midterm back with all the questions and everything on it, and then you answered it that way, I would go underlining the question. Here's what I was looking for, And if I say good on an answer, that means you got what I was looking for. If I said okay on a question, what that means is if I get a chance to regrade this, I'm going to look at this because I felt like what you said was acceptable. It wasn't necessarily exactly what I was looking for. Okay? Again, those are reminders to me because I do want to attempt to be fair to you. Okay? I went ahead. Can you guys see the grading part of Blackboard?
Yes.
Okay, so I did post the midterm, but you can't see everybody's, right? Okay, I posted the midterm grades and I posted some of the participation grades. So here's what I've done on that. I think there was 150 points for participation. And so if you're here at all the classes and you participate in class, which this class has been really good. I've had classes where you have 3 or 4 people that never say anything, never participate at all. and they get dinged for that. But this class has been in general really good about participating. So I give you the 150 points. If you miss a couple of classes, then I'll ding you for the classes you weren't at. So again, if you think that's unfair, you want to have a discussion with me, I'll be glad to have a discussion with you. Yes.
So for the classes that we weren't at, if we went back and watched the presentation, the
That's a good
video,
point.
and,
Yeah.
and made it up, is that something that if we communicate that to you, we could
Yeah,
get those
I'd be
back?
willing to. Yeah, I'd be willing to include that. That's a good, really good point. Okay. All right. Anything else? Who's going to do book reports today? 1, 2. I thought I had a couple
I
people.
think
over here.
Elizabeth was too.
Okay. All right. So we have at least 3, and so you want to go ahead and start?
Sure.
Hey everybody, I'm Mike. I practice in front of my 5-year-old, and she said I needed to cut it down a little bit. So. The book I read was Future Edge, and it's by Joel Barker here. I probably wouldn't have picked it based on the cover alone, but I'm glad I read it. He's a futurist, and that's somebody who studies trends and events to predict the future. He has a doctorate in visionary leadership, and he believes that the highest probability of success for growth is in the future and anticipating that future. And you do that by looking at paradigms, and the biggest shifts in the future are done by paradigm shifts. And a paradigm is a set of ideas, rules that people in our organizations have, sort of what we've been studying in the system modeling class. And sometimes it can just be a perspective that somebody has. The first example he uses is the Swiss watch industry. In the 1960s, if you wanted a top-of-the-line watch, you'd buy a Swiss watch, and the national industry was actually built on it. It held 65% of the market, and 90% of it was the profit. The ironic thing is that in 1967, Swiss watchmakers actually invented the quartz electronic watch, and they introduced it into a watch symposium in the 60s, and they're so blinded by their ideas of what a watch should be, they didn't see the potential. They were at the top of the game, and they decided to keep the status quo. The bad thing is that a smaller company named Seiko was there, a Japanese company, and by the 1980s, they took over the watch market. So Barker says to use tools to help prepare for the future. Influence understanding, what influences your perceptions, divergent thinking, that's understanding that there's probably more than one correct answer to a question. Convergent thinking, focus on your priorities and goals. Mapping, draw a pathway to your future that you want. And imaging, picture what you want to find in your exploration of the future. Paradigms exist because they solve current problems. What causes a shift? Maybe we lack the technology to solve that problem, and that technology comes along. Or maybe just in the long run we get smarter as a whole. And something he really gets at is that outsiders are more likely to solve the problems than insiders that are trapped by these rules. A good example is General Electric Company in the 1930s. They used to play a trick on their new engineers when they came in. Their project manager would sit them down and give them this task to create a light bulb that had even luminescence throughout the whole bulb. But in the 30s, it was really bad that you had like hot spots on the bulbs. Well, this worked well, and everybody sat back and laughed, and the engineer, and they brought him in on a joke, yeah, that's impossible, until 1952, when someone actually solved the problem. He was not bound by or aware of the rules that everybody had at the corporation. Some key points. Everyone goes back to zero when a paradigm shifts. Adapt to the new paradigm, but do it better. There's almost always more than one correct answer. Paradigms lead to a terminal disease of certainty, like the GE Corporation. And we can choose to change our paradigm. Always listen. And where I see that this book touches on the PMBOK is Barker believes that total quality management is the biggest paradigm shift of the 20th century. And that's where we shifted from capacity-driven to consumer-driven type businesses. And budgets and timelines can be met, but deliverables are not acceptable if the quality is not up to par. Lack of quality can increase costs, bring losses to your reputation, and in turn make it harder to garner new businesses.
Okay, any questions or comments? Will you send me that electronically?
Sure.
So that I have the book. I really like this. Who had used the word paradigm? Okay, so for a long time that was not something we talked about, but now that you're talking about mental models in the fifth discipline, does it make sense that that's really what we're talking about? Paradigms, mental models are the way we make decisions without a set of rules, or we assume a certain amount of things. So I'm a big fan of that book. I think it's funny. Was it about 80, mid 80s or something?
It says 92 on the front.
92.
cover, but
Okay, so it's been a while now, so it's a little bit,
it's still relevant.
but it's extremely relevant to what we're talking about in terms of systems and dealing with systems and managing systems. So I think it's a good read. There's another book. I'm not sure it was on our list of books for this, but it's one of my favorite management style books, and it's called First Break All the Rules. Did anybody get that book? You got that? Okay. Really good book that has some commonalities with us.
Quite a bit.
So I'll let you speak to that when it's your turn. All right.
From a project management standpoint, have you ever, I don't know, like consulted a project management as a more in a consulting role for a company?
Me or the guys I work with, yeah, on a regular basis, we do, from planning through even doing some mentoring of new project managers. We've done that in the past.
Would you say it's going in and doing a paradigm shift for that company that's non-project based?
Absolutely. A big piece of that is lots of organizations use project manager as a job title. And that's the norm. The exception is for somebody to treat project management like a profession. So that's that whole paradigm shift from, I am the project manager. Well, what does that mean? I am in charge, right? Now, if somebody says you're a project manager, you're going to handle that with a little more care and kid gloves, aren't you? Because if you call somebody a project manager, you're assuming they can spell WBS and they understand the relationship between the pieces and they're concerned about earned value, and right? So there's way more to it than a job title. Yeah, so that's a good catch. It is a paradigm shift. All right, nicely done. Who was second?
Go ahead.
Sure. Jonathan Walker. I did the book The Goal by Eli Goldratt. It was also written in the 80s, like 84, and I think it was actually his first novel. And actually, I did misspeak, that is novel. He actually wrote this like, it has a story behind it. It's from a plant manager, Alex Rogo's perspective. He even has marital issues in the book, so it actually makes it a pretty good and easy read. Something a little about Eli or Goldratt. He wanted people to learn by the Socratic method. He wanted to ask them questions and then have them go out to their audience and kind of deduce the answer, essentially saying that he doesn't think learning is reading a book and giving somebody the answer. He thinks it's you going out and actually putting it into practice, trying to figure out what it is, and then he would just guide you by questions, making you think, making you figure out the next step. And so that's kind of the same way the book reads. This plant manager's in a whole lot of trouble. It starts off with his plant's going to shut down in 3 months if he doesn't start making it efficient. He runs into this physicist in the airport, and he starts saying, "Hey, I bet you're you have high inventories, you're never making shipments, and he's going, how do you know that? I didn't give you any of that information. And that guy's name is Jonah. So throughout the book, he calls on Jonah when he runs into issues. Jonah asks him questions, which makes him initially kind of annoyed because he's trying to figure out what the issue is, but he starts to learn. One of his biggest learning ones was he actually had to go the weekend with the Boy Scouts, and they were hiking. And initially the fastest ones would go off, they'd take off, and then they had the middle ones, and then he had the guys way in the back, and he couldn't keep control over them. And so some of the things he learns about this is really all about theory of constraints, bottlenecks, non-bottlenecks, but he starts putting that into practice so he tried taking the slowest guy and making him in front, and then everybody just stacked up, and then they had another issue. So then he started taking like weight off the guy who was the slowest and giving it to the ones that are faster and making them more balanced. Everybody else would really think this is a lot like our lean class last semester. It really ties closely with lean. Same kind of things. They did throughput, inventory, bottlenecks, wasted time, balancing flow. But in the end, they come up with some pretty good questions that they finally deduce in the last chapter. And that the first questions you should look at when you go into the thinking process is what to change to, and then how to cause that kind of change. And if you relate it back to the PMBOK, really this would be great in planning, to know your constraints, know how to attack those particular constraints so that the rest of the project doesn't get bogged down. And also monitoring and controlling. That way you're getting the feedback, you're knowing what you need to control and how to address that issue. One of the other quick examples in the book was that they had just spent a whole bunch of money on these really expensive robots that were supposed to make them really efficient, and they were actually like the farthest thing from efficient. They had actually just taken all the labor that they were using there and moved it to another area, so they never lost any cost. And so that they had to go through and figure out how to handle all that. So that's about the gist.
So if you're a fan of theory of constraints, this is a good read. Do you
Absolutely.
Recommend it?
I do. It's a pretty good book. I actually would have said with project management, his second book, which was Critical Chain, would have been maybe a little more applicable to this, but it's still applicable.
Yeah. Okay, good. Yeah. Okay, nicely done. And you will send me
Do you
that.
want it electronic or do you want this?
I would like to have it electronically, and the part of the reason for that is I've submitted a couple of book reports for the practice periodical, so if I have it electronically, that
Sure.
makes it easy
I'll
for
email
me to submit it. So, okay, nicely done. Thank you.
All right. Okay, today I'm going to review the book by Daniel Pink, and it's titled Drive. So we touched on this last week a little bit as to what motivates people in the workplace, and the first thing that comes up is money, of course. But Pink, he's going to argue that point and say that no, it's not what he calls extrinsic motivators, but it's actually intrinsic. So what Drive does, he analyzes the development of motivation throughout the book, and he explains the evolution by partitioning the book into 3 stages, which is Motivation 1, Motivation 2.0, and Motivation 3.0. So Motivation 1.0 is the basis of existence. It's you work to survive. I mean, if you didn't, back long ago, if you didn't go out and hunt and gather, then you didn't eat and you didn't survive very long. So as society evolved, we got into the Industrial Revolution, and the type of workforce changed over the years. So as factory owners, they recognized that if you took care of your people, then they did a good job for you, and if you didn't, then you would get poor performance. So the philosophy was to reward good behavior and then punish bad behavior. And Pink refers to this as Motivation 2.0. And this kind of thinking endured for a long time, and Pink says it worked well until it didn't. So what happened to Motivation 2.0, and how did it become ineffective? Well, Pink says that in order for extrinsic rewards to work, the job or the task has to be boring, that doesn't involve any type of creativity. And so that was the situation for most factory jobs, is very repetition you know, the same thing over and over again. And he backs his theory up by, they did some experiments with the presenter having two groups. One, he's going to give some type of monetary, you know, prize to the person who can complete this puzzle the quickest. And then this other group, he just asked them to complete the puzzle. Well, come to find out, the ones that were, you know, trying to get the money, saw it the quickest, they actually had the longest times, because Pink's theory is that once you put that in front of them, their creativity is impeded, and they're just looking at the end piece. They can't, you know, look outside the box. So then now, so as we get into the 21st century, the job market, it shifted from you know, factory-based jobs to more entrepreneurial and high-tech workforce. And he's calling this new type of philosophy used for this group Motivation 3.0. And this, he describes companies like Google and Facebook and how they use extrinsic rewards to recruit and retain their best employees. These companies, they actually encourage their employees to take 25% of their work week and work on things that are important to them, not necessarily, you know, even work related, but they just want that creativity going all the time. And so these companies, they realize that unconventional, you know, workspace and very liberal work schedules, that these are more value to employees than, say, a bonus. So the author, he gives us 3 elements that he says that you need to have in the workplace today. It's autonomy, mastery, and purpose in the workplace. And Pink writes that if you manage using these principles, then you'll have better people and they'll be happier. When you look at autonomy, this allows people to be creative and self-organized. And then if you give them the right tools, they can improve the mastery, and then in turn this allows them to pursue their purpose on their own terms. So I thought about, well, how does this, you know, tie into project management when project managers just want to, you know, manage everything? But you have to think that once a project manager picks his team, he has to let that sub-project go. Once he turns it over to a painting contractor or somebody else, you know, you don't want to be looking over their shoulder the whole time. A good project leader, they're going to promote autonomy within their staff, and they want to enable their staff to accomplish their goals. And so this will allow them to become more independent and be confident with their decisions. So in turn, if you allow your staff the autonomy to do their work, then in time this creates more time for the project manager to, you know, be doing other things, and it also produces a happier, more gratified staff.
One thing, when you flip the page there, you said companies like Google and Facebook focus on extrinsic. Did you mean
I'm sorry.
intrinsic?
Yes, I did.
Intrinsic.
Yes.
Intrinsic motivators. So I just that's probably what you
Yeah.
have written, but I
Yeah.
want to make sure that clarification's there. It's a different way of managing. The other thing I want to bring out of this was if you really want to amp up the performance of your team or your project, what would you do differently? How would you manage differently? You would focus on 3 things. What are they? Autonomy, mastery,
Purpose.
and purpose. So does that not deserve a boo? That'll be on the text, because this is one of my favorite, and I should ask you, do you recommend this book?
Yeah, I do. I liked it. It was real quick reading. It got a little redundant, I think, but overall I liked it.
And a fairly easy read
Oh, yeah.
for the amount of meat that's there. The
Yeah.
other thing I really like about his book is this is research-based.
Yes.
It's not about somebody's opinion. This is what's going on. And it's consistent with some of the more classical motivational theories that we talked about earlier, and we'll talk about here in the next few minutes. So
Can you see the video we learned about?
we are going to see the video. What I was going to do is I was going to finish the HR stuff and then finish with that video when lunch gets here. Is lunch here?
Yeah.
It is.
Could you say what AMP stands for again?
Yeah, it's autonomy, mastery, and purpose. And so what he's essentially saying is people want to work on things that really matter. They want to get better. They want to grow personally and professionally. And this is not about delegation. This is about having some personal control. So it's autonomy. People don't necessarily want to work by themselves. So I think he carefully chose that word and goes, and you'll see that with when we watch the video here in a few minutes too. So if you want, you can go get lunch and I'll get queued up to do the HR stuff that we want to finish today, and then we'll watch that video.
I'll send you that electronically.
Thank you, yes. Okay, if you want to get lunch, go ahead and get lunch.